described last week's budget as completely anti-women and children, with reductions in child benefit and the taxing of maternity benefits. You add to that the cuts to the back-to-school clothing and footwear allowance. The Social Protection Minister, Joan Burton, has rejected such claims, saying that the government has been maintaining the principle of a universally paid child benefit at a relatively high level. The Children's Rights Alliance has carried out its annual assessment of the impact of the budget on children, and Tanya Ward, their chief executive, is here with me. Tanya, you've compared this budget to a roller coaster ride with crashing lows and a few highs. Let's deal with the crashing lows. What are they?
Well, obviously the most obvious one is the cut to child benefit, and that's bringing in savings to the government of 136 million. Now, we all accept that we need reform in the way that we support families raising children. But the problem here is this 136 million, we were looking to see, would this be redirected into affordable childcare? Would it be redirected into a second payment for families on low income? And would it be redirected into services for children and families? And that hasn't actually happened at all. This money has been lost to us.
Yes, but you see, Joan Burton would say to you, to counter that, she would say she has maintained core welfare payments, and that these were the choices. They were tough choices, but the choices that had to be made.
Well, I think there's an acceptance there, though, that we need to introduce another payment for families on low income. People are at the breadline at the moment. They're trying to pay basic heating bills. It worries me when people are cut off from their energy providers and they're not reconnecting. That suggests that they're in absolute dire circumstances. And I mean, in addition to that, what we can't understand, there's an acceptance certainly from the Minister's Department that we need to support families on low income. Then why would you reduce the back to education or the back to school allowance, which is going directly to the families that need it most?
Let's talk about that allowance for a minute. How much it is, or how much it was before this budget, and who it goes to, and why it's so crucial.
Well, it's going to families on low income. You're looking at 191,000 families that benefited from it this year, and it's. Now, remembering it has already been reduced year on for the last few years.
So it's down now from 150
to 100 for smaller children. For children over 12, you're looking at it's down from 250 to 200. That's pretty significant because it didn't cover the cost of going to school in any case.
How much does it cost on average to kit a child out to go, let's say, to go to secondary school?
About around €700. That's what it costs a child at second level.
Are you adding in their school books?
That's school books, that's uniforms.
But there is a separate scheme, is there not, to cover school
there,
books?
There is, but
families.
if a younger child that's around 374, there's been studies done on that. So if this is a €50 cut, it's not much to a lot of people, but what it does mean to a child, it's a pair of shoes, it's probably a few socks, and it could be a few vests if you're lucky. That's the kind of impact it's going to have on children and families next autumn. We're actually pushing families further into debt by taking these direct payments away from them.
What should they have done?
Well, they should have looked at introducing a new payment for families on very low income. There's already the FIS payment that could have been increased. They should have also introduced proper childcare supports for families. That's one of the main expenses for families. That's one of the things I struggle with it myself. I have a small child, and providing a second year, an early childhood year of school could have made a real difference.
Because we have the 1 year free early childhood.
And that's a positive. I mean, we retained that this year.
But it hasn't been extended.
And it hasn't been extended.
Now, what about a few highs? Because we're talking here about children, and we've just come through the children's referendum. Are there positives in this budget to underpin that vote in the children's referendum? The referendum.
I mean, there's another negative that I have to just before we move on to the other positives, and it is linked directly to the referendum. Over 1 million people came out to vote in this referendum, and the majority of us voted yes. And what we were doing voting yes was the system. So what you would expect is that children and family services, which is provided by the HSE at the moment, would have had an increase in their budget. And in fact, they had a decrease of about 5 million. And there's a new child and family support agency that's supposed to be established in 2013. And Children and Family Services is already carrying a deficit of 50 million. So if you think of it, we have a child protection system that's broken, that's under-resourced. We have plans to have a new agency, and yet we haven't seen the money follow through for that agency.
And are you saying that agency is going to be starting off with a deficit?
It's starting off with a deficit at the moment, unless the government plugs that deficit and gives them a proper start-up fund.
Let's talk about a few positives from this budget for children. What do you see those positives as?
Well, the government is continuing to deliver on its commitment to stop using St Patrick's Institution for 16 and 17-year-old boys. So just to remember, 16 and 17-year-old boys are being detained with adults. We had a recent report from the Inspector of Prisons that said that some children were being placed in 23-hour lockup for their own protection.
We didn't wait for the budget for this, though. We knew that they were going to expand.
They made this commitment in January last year of 50 million, and they followed through with this budget. They've made 20 million available for the redevelopment of Oberstown. There's going to be 6 new units with 30 places for young boys, and that means they'll be able to stop sending children to St Patrick's Institution. So that's a positive, because even in the boom years we didn't manage to find the money to build this, to redevelop this detention facility.
They've also found money, not a huge amount of money, but the whole area of bullying of young people, and we've heard tragically too much about that in the last couple of months. There's a €500,000 allocation to anti-bullying programmes in schools. How important is this?
It's incredibly important because, as you know, there's been a number of children who've taken their lives recently because of bullying. And even as an adult, if you've experienced bullying, you realise the impact that it has in your life, how it interferes with your development and your education as a person. But I think overall in the budget, what we found is that education actually does quite well in this budget, because what they've managed to do is avoid introducing any regressive measures. They've maintained their frontline services. They've maintained the allocation of teachers for disadvantaged schools.
Probably learned from last year's budget with the cut to DEIS schools, which ended up being reversed.
That's it indeed. And they've even found new money for this anti-bullying strategy. So I suppose in the education front, we've done quite well. And I already mentioned that we're also retaining the universal free early childhood year for children. That's a very positive development, because 65,000 children benefited from that last year.
Now, there's an initiative called the Area-Based Poverty Initiative. Do you know what underpins this initiative? It is a promise of 6,000 after-school places.
Well, this has been introduced, and I have to say, it's a positive development that they've made money available for after schools places. But there's a real problem in this country where we don't have a nationally funded or subsidised childcare system. It affects many people, in particular lone parents, because it does force them into a poverty trap where it makes it much more difficult for them to seek and secure employment. So I suppose the work salary they're going to receive won't cover the cost of childcare. Exactly, that's it. I suppose so. It's positive that there's going to be these 6,000 places, but there's no real detail on what this scheme might actually look like. And there's certainly some concern out there that the scheme might, in actual fact, won't be child-centred. There's no programme or infrastructure to back it up. So we really need to see what the rationale is behind it and what it might look like.
And will it come from Joan Burton's department, or will it come from Frances Fitzgerald?
It's going to come from Frances Fitzgerald's department, so we need to watch what that is.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Tanya Ward, the Chief Executive of the Children's Rights Alliance.